Excellent. Hope everybody is secure today. My name is David Wren. I'm the president and CEO of NTP Cybersecurity. We offer all different kinds of security products and solutions to a host of different clients, anywhere from small to mid-sized companies all the way up to Fortune 500 companies. Also, in this region, I'm the president of InfraGard. InfraGard is an independent organization, but works closely with the FBI and their cyber squad here in the St. Louis region. I work on many security advisory boards for different colleges, universities, and organizations, and provide virtual CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, support for multiple organizations as well. So I wanted to talk about trends. We can move to the next slide. And what's kind of going on in our industry right now, because we'll talk about the typical stuff that we always see, but we'll also go into a little bit more detail on some things that we're seeing that are COVID related. We can go ahead and move forward. The most targeted industries today are small to mid-sized businesses, and I'll give a few reasons why. Medical and healthcare, government entities, particularly municipalities, educational, and financial. Typically, the small to mid-sized businesses don't have a lot of manpower expertise, or they don't have the right tools in place to prevent attacks, or more specifically, identify the attack early. Medical and healthcare, they're on that targeted list because they have a host of information, and a lot of times on the dark web, the medical information is worth more than financial information. Out of these five, financials is probably the strongest, least targeted amongst the five, but the strongest because they've had regulation for years in securing the client data and information that they have, and that compliancy with those regulations have driven investment in cybersecurity solutions and monitoring for organizations. Next slide, please. General statistics for data on the dark web. The records are about $148. Now, this can go up and down by industry. If you are in the educational space, the average cost of a record could be $200 to $250. But on normal average, it's about $148. Cybercrime this year is going to be in excess of $2 trillion. And a lot of that was related to COVID. Interesting statistics are about 3 out of 4 of us have compromised credentials out on the dark web today. And nearly 20% of us have a compromised social security number that's out there. And usually when we do these presentations live, I ask for a show of hands of anybody that knows someone who couldn't file a tax return because their social security number was on the dark web or had been compromised. And usually in an audience, we get 2 or 3 people. And even in my case, my wife, her social security number was compromised. And so that's proof that it could happen to anybody. Next slide, please. Still today, the majority of cyber attacks and data breaches, over 80% of those are due to weak or stolen passwords. That's kind of interesting because this is something that we all know, and something that's been out there for quite a while. But we should never use the same password for work, nor our employees, for work as home, or something that you're using at work you shouldn't use for private credit cards or any of that. Always use a different passphrase over an individual password. And those passphrases can You don't have to change them every 30 to 60 days or 90 days. As long as it's a good password, you can have it for an extended period of time, as long as it's not shared or easily guessed by a bad actor. The other interesting statistic is the majority of companies that have fewer than 1,000 employees have already been hacked or compromised, and the majority of them don't even know it. And that just comes to monitoring network traffic and looking and seeing what's kind of going on the network. The typical time to detect that a bad actor is on your network is over 6 months. The interesting statistic there is, even though it's over 6 months to detect them, it can take on average up to 9 months to remediate the organization and totally get them out and cleaned, so that the environment is free of their fingerprints or any kind of artifacts that are left behind. And some of those artifacts that are left behind could also be used in a future attack. Additionally, in every 40 seconds, an organization becomes a victim of cybercrime. And something that's kind of important to think about, when an organization becomes a victim, it's a human issue. It's a human attacker that is exploiting a human either configuration problem, configuration error, or one of our employees that click on a bad email or a bad link, or exercises an action based off of an email that was sent to them. Next slide. Some of the things that we're seeing with the increase of IoT devices, there's going to be probably 85 billion IoT devices just in the next few years. And IoT is Internet of Things. These are refrigerators, there are HVAC systems. Almost everything that's coming out in new technology is going to be connected to the internet. And those devices typically have very poor or insecure configurations. And they go out and they connect to a wireless network to go out and get updates or to control from our devices or phone devices, etc. The other thing that these devices, and this happened in the St. Louis region, it was a global attack, but it happened in the St. Louis region not that long ago, where the many IoT devices, and in this case it was DVRs, that and VCRs that were taken over by a botnet, and those botnets were taking and sending volumes of traffic out to many different organizations. And in the St. Louis area, it actually took down several large company networks, and it took it down for multiple hours. I know one of the local universities, their network was knocked out for over 8 hours. So it's a very real threat that's out there. And so it's kind of important to secure those IoT devices to the best that we can. And also at the same time, making sure on our networks that we have the proper type of security in place that would block an attack or prevent an attack from an IoT device. Next slide. Machine learning and AI, or artificial intelligence, is really good for us in cyber defense. It's also good for advancing computer technology and studying large volumes of data. But at the same time, it's also a good tool for the bad actors. And the bad actors are looking to discover ways that they can exploit not only machine learning or contextual learning, but and artificial intelligence. But as they learn more and more on how to exploit that, it becomes a really good tool for them. So it's kind of a good thing to not eliminate the human element in a cyber defense and the human element into network monitoring and prevention. Because when we do that, if the bad actor gets in and it poisons, is kind of what it's called, poisoning the data that the machine learning is working off of, then the results either generate false positives Or worse is it doesn't identify by what we call false negatives, bad actor activity that's kind of going on in a network. Next slide. And vehicle security is an emerging threat. More and more automotives. I think there's over 330 million automobiles out there that have connection to the internet today. And in the St. Louis region, we've got a couple of researchers that are really, really good at hacking into vehicles and learning how those attacks happen, so that we can provide security into the vehicle. But we have the ability to remote start our vehicles, or remote shut the vehicles off from our cell phones. If you think about how secure those systems are, the damage that a bad actor could do while you're driving down a highway is turn the vehicle off, or turn blinkers on, or even say, tell the system that's running the car that you're out of fuel whenever you have a full tank, and it would emulate running out of gas. So it's kind of important to look at how we connect to our vehicles and make sure that we have proper security in place. Knowing that this is happening, the automotive industry and researchers are working really diligently, because probably in the next 10 years, the majority of our vehicles are going to be electric vehicles that have more and more computers and more IoT devices within them. Next slide. 5G also is a big concern, because as we increase bandwidth, it's going to increase the potential for bad actor activity. The 5G is a big deal because it's going to increase bandwidth to not only our houses and our businesses, but it's kind of go just like the internet is connected to multiple nation states. It's going to open that bandwidth up. So when we talk about botnet and DDoS activity, that's going to be a major problem as we move into more of a connected world within 5G. And then even remote areas in farmland that's out there will have connectivity via 5G in the near future. And even other countries that don't have good infrastructure will be able to access 5G networks. So it could bring on a whole new wave of nation state attacks into not only the businesses, but our homes. And as we look at the home environment, we'll have to make sure that we're adequately protecting those IoT devices as well, because they could be used to create additional botnets. Next slide. The current state of cyber, we can kind of move forward to the next slide, please. We see a continuing wide range of cyber attacks. This is a major inconvenience. As you can realize, a lot of companies out there are generally closed or are knocked out, either going into bankruptcy after a data breach, or it could take them weeks or months to get up and running. These bad actors, they are nation states, but it's also the new mafia that is criminal hacking enterprises. And being over a $2 trillion industry, there's a lot of success that they have in the financial theft. More than 25% of current attacks involve those IoT devices. So inside the environment where they are, it's good to use multi-factor authentication, or MFA, whenever you are accessing a corporate environment from your home, or having your employees utilize MFA over even VPN technology. Ransomware and email phishing are a huge issue and a huge problem still. We can move to the next slide. Ransomware has grown over 400%. It was on a track in January of a 350% annually. It's over 400% increase year over year, and 94% of those are fileless-based attacks, meaning that it's not downloading an executable to execute. It's working in memory on the computer, before, and the bad actors are able to collect information about the environment and maybe even data. They'll do data exfiltration or extraction prior to launching the ransomware that would then encrypt the data. The average cost of these attacks is about $2.4 million whenever you have a remediation team come in, notifications to clients, and doing state notification laws. And then just being closed or are not able to do business for weeks or months. We've worked a lot of these in the St. Louis area where we're helping clients get back up and running. And sometimes when there's proper backups, we can do that in a very quick methodology. If there's not good backups, it can take months to get back up and running. And you can think of the time that you're out of business or the business isn't operational, that the amount of time costs tens of thousands of dollars, if not more. Next slide. The majority of ransomware and malware is malicious software, is still delivered by email. On average, 1 out of 131 emails contains some form of malware. And the most common method for malware infections comes through email phishing attacks. We're going to talk a little bit about layer 8, and layer 8 is actually the human element, and that's all of us, it's our employees, and it's our consumers, our customers. And that is one of the greatest weaknesses, as whenever you have that human element that's actually reading email and then they want to click. So it's kind of important to have a two-phase approach there, where we continuously educate the human element and continuously offer tools and techniques to layer 8 so that they can improve and not be such a happy clicker or a rapid clicker, and just take a little bit of time and understand what they're seeing before they click. The other thing is having the proper protections in place, because there is human error and everybody makes mistakes. It's kind of important to have the right set of tools and products that are helping. So if malware does get on a system, it's blocked by a next generation or advanced endpoint, but also proper tools in the email itself that prevent the attacks from ever coming through. Still today, we see that about 12% of those malicious emails that come through are clicked on by an employee or a user. Next slide. The different types of social engineering attacks are just the broad-based phishing. And a good example would be the Windows or the Amazon or Starbucks gift cards, where you're sending that out to everybody in an organization, or thousands at a time. One of the reasons that phishing is so successful is because you can say, how much does it cost to send an email? It generally doesn't cost that much. And there's no difference in sending one email. If you have the right kind of list, you can send, millions of emails at the same time. And with a 2 to 3% success rate, that equals, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to the criminal organization. Spear phishing also is very successful and could be categorized as business being compromised. And a lot of organizations see that, where a bad actor will emulate either a client environment, or they send an email and say, hey, I'm the CEO, and I need all the W-9s for the organization. We've seen where people have sent out W-9s. Or if they are emulating a client, so maybe the client environment is targeted or a vendor environment is targeted and compromised, they may send an email and request payment on an invoice. We recently saw that in the St. Louis area. Just in the last month, there was a contractor that did some work for an organization. And within that organization, they had the client environment, they had a compromise. And so when they saw the invoice from the contractor come in, the bad actor sent a follow-up email, kind of spoofing the contractor, and said, "Hey, if you pay this by ACH transfer, we can, and you do that this week, we can give you a 15% discount." So they communicated with the bad actor, not knowing, and they made the ACH transfer and paid the invoice to the bad actor. So then, when the 30 days were up, the contractor reached out to the client and said, "Hey, this is open, and when are you going to pay your invoice?" So that, as you can imagine, creates a lot of pain. So it's good to have that security awareness training to know what to look for, but also any kind of defenses that would prevent that. And communication, specifically with accounts payable, receivable, HR, and payroll people, are very important to watch for those types of targeted phishing attacks. Man in the middle attacks could be even over Wi-Fi at coffee shops, or somebody that can sniff the traffic or monitor Wi-Fi traffic to get in. Vishing and smishing. Vishing is calling. So often, like my team, we will call into an organization that has paid us to do it and ask them to send us records or information. And the majority of the time, we're successful in getting that data. And we try to emulate a bad actor so we can take that information and train the environment and provide that security awareness training. Smishing is the same thing, and you can imagine, because you with our mini computers and cell phones that we walk around with, there's been a lot more spam on the cell phones just in the last 12 months than we've ever seen before. And those are smishing attacks that come in from, not all of them, but from bad actors are starting to do that. And then simply mining social media. We tell our client environments to watch what you post, have a social media policy, and make sure that your employees aren't posting, "Hey, this person's on vacation." We have a bank client, a regional bank client, and they have a mortgage division. And we saw where somebody in the mortgage department was on vacation, and we saw that via social media. So we sent an email to that location's management and said that we were going to have an investigator come by and look at that particular machine. So we had somebody go in and just kind of cold into the environment and said, "Hey, we need access to this machine. We're doing an investigation and it's critical." And they let us right in to get access to that machine. And we utilize multiple tools to do that, but that social media monitoring and management of that, of what's being posted out there, is critical to save and secure our organizations. This is just something to be aware of. Next slide. The IC3 is, you can go to ic3.org. It's where you can report different attacks. And on a weekly basis, there's typically 1,000 events that are reported into IC3. And this year, COVID-related attacks have increased by over 300%. And a lot of those are coming from, they look like they're vaccine related, COVID-19 rules or policies by the company, or even the World Health Organization. As you can imagine, this is something that's on the minds of everybody, and a solution to that problem. And so the bad actors know that, and they're utilizing that to go out to companies for phishing and spear phishing, and individuals. When we went from a corporate environment and our businesses from working on computers to a home-based environment, there's a lot of changes, and a lot of the natural curiosities and guard of individuals of layer 8s kind of got relaxed a little bit because they're out of their normal domain. So the success rate of those attacks actually went up. And then as we went back to work, again, it was a change to the normal daily, and we still see a rise in those COVID-19 related attacks. So it's kind of important to communicate with the employees and develop a a subject line or something that works for your environment, and make sure that before they click on stuff, how information related to COVID or company COVID policies are communicated to your employees. Additionally, when it's COVID related, it's kind of important to look at PPP and the PPP financing, because bad actors are watching for that data so that they can kind of exploit that as well. So we'll jump into the dark web, a little bit about how the dark web works, because this is kind of something that's interesting and fascinating to me. And something I like to point out here is the difference between Google, which we've all heard about, because typically when you go to look for something on the internet, you use Google. But have you ever heard of Candle? And Candle is a search engine, and if you look at the color scheme and the number of letters in the name, it's kind of interesting how it emulates Google. More and more you hear of DuckDuckGo, where Google indexes the internet, and they sell advertisement on things. If you've gone into Google and you're looking for a new pair of boots, and then every time you log in to one of your social media accounts, you see these boots pop up. Well, they're adding cookies and trackers to your credentials. So whenever you search by those credentials at home, and then you come into work and you search by those same credentials, username and password, then it pops up and it already knows what you're looking for. And that's how it populates those ads. There's been a lot of marketing for DuckDuckGo recently, and DuckDuckGo is a good search engine. You can get on it and use it for everything that you normally would, but it doesn't index and track your specific information for marketing. These other ones, Search, Not Evil, Torch, Candle, are specifically to the dark web, and it takes a process to find them and go and to be able to get on those search engines. Next slide, please. When we look at what Google indexes, and you may be familiar with this slide, but the internet as we know on a daily basis is about 4 to 5% of the overall web that's out there. The deep web is the largest portion. It's approximately 90%. And the deep web contains information that's on all of our networks. So it's behind a firewall. It's not indexable or reachable from the outside world. And then it could be medical information, research papers, corporate documentation, corporate finances, or company finances, and anything that would be behind a paywall, where a pay far service would also exist on the deep web. The dark web is where all the illicit activity and bad stuff happens. It's definitely encrypted. A lot of things to the worst of your imagination can exist on the dark web, and there's a lot of activity that happens around that. It really started mostly with drug trafficking. Today, that still exists. Human trafficking. There's a lot of Bitcoin activity that goes on, and because it's encrypted, it makes it very difficult to track and find these everything that exists out there. There are some services that you pay for that monitors the dark web for information. So if you think about when you say monitor the dark web, typically there's so much stuff on the dark web that is inaccessible by general means that it's not available and it can't be searched. So when organizations say we're searching the dark web, the majority of that is known information on the dark web. And that information pops up in different websites, which we'll go into that here in a second. Next slide. To get on a dark web, you need to get onto the Onion router or a Tor network. This used to be pretty challenging to do that, to set up an Onion router. Today it's very easy because you can Google Tor, get on Tor, and start searching on the dark web. But there is some danger in doing that. If we can go to the next slide. Because once you're on a Tor browser and you just jump on and go, depending on how you do it, a lot of that information can still be tracked and easily tracked. So typically when you get onto the dark web and you're starting to search, it's very important to do that a in a safe manner, depending on if you want to be tracked or not. And if you just jump on and go, typically there's either you could be tracked either by the bad guys or the good guys. So that's something that we recommend to kind of stay off of that network if you don't have a business need for it. Additionally, on the dark web are some legitimate companies and legitimate businesses, because if you wanted to go buy a vehicle, you could find a dealership on the dark web and buy a vehicle with Bitcoin and just have that transaction. You know, you would license a vehicle in a state that you're in and everything, but it's just a transaction that would happen on the dark web, and it would be a legal transaction. But obviously there's a lot more illegal activity that happens there as well. Next slide. Next slide. So once you're on there and you're searching, you could pull up Candle, you could pull up these different search engines, and you can kind of look for different things that you would want. And one of the things that I wanted to show here, since we talked about botnets earlier and IoT devices, is you can go on the dark web and you can look for services that actually would do, they have this network of botnets, and you could purchase that network for a certain amount of time and do some sort of attack with that botnet. Next slide, please. This is one of the sites that you could get to. So you could actually purchase for a percentage of a Bitcoin. Email hacking, you provide a target, you hire a hacker, and they would go and do this. You can purchase ransomware, you can purchase DDoS attacks, and that's I wanted to talk about that because this actually has happened once or twice a year for the last 3 to 4 years in the St. Louis area, where we have a school student, and originally it was mostly high school students. This past year, we saw where a middle school student was successful at getting on the dark web and purchasing a DDoS attack against their school. And they would do this timed on whenever they would have an online test. So there was an online test scheduled for third hour. Somebody went in, they bought a DDoS attack against their school, and it brought the school's network down. Therefore, the test was not able to go through. But that just kind of goes to show that if a middle school student can figure it out, you could have bad actors do this, or even a competitor for some sort of corporate espionage could go on and purchase some sort of attack that would happen on a dark web that would be very difficult to trace or track. So again, it's kind of important to have some of those defenses in place to protect your network and your data, as well as your websites. Next slide, please. When I was talking about it's very difficult to kind of scan the dark web and find everything, here's an example of in the middle here. It says, if you want to become a member, go to. Now this site has been taken down, but I wanted to give this example because to show that even though there's dark web monitoring services, which are important to have, because the sooner you know that credentials are on the dark web, the sooner you can protect yourself by changing those credentials internally. But this particular site, if you wanted to be a member, you would click through here. They would give you a target, and then you would need to go in and hack that target and provide the data and information that they're looking for. Once they validated that information, then they would let you be a member of the site. And And the site is where a lot of these bad actors communicate and they share information. So a company that may have a data breach, or a company or organization that is constantly under attack, as one of the members gets information about the organization, they'll create a file on that company and they start to share that information internally within the members on how they're successful and what they're looking at. And it just kind of like crowd funds or crowdsources the attack against the organization, against the targeted organization. And everything that happens behind there is not easily searched or monitored by anybody unless they broke the law to become a member. Next slide, please. It's kind of interesting too about how information is bought and sold on the dark web. It kind of works very similar to Amazon or eBay, where you have buyers and sellers. The buyers and sellers have 4 or 5 star ratings. And within those ratings, typically you would have a 5-star person selling to a 3 to 5 star individual. And they know, because there's honor amongst thieves, that whenever you buy this list of information, you're buying the exclusive right to use that data or list of credit card numbers for a certain period of time. As the data has been on the network for longer periods of time, are available for longer periods of time, the cost of those records and data goes down. So there's something that I like to refer to as bullyware or bully attacks, like Yahoo. The Yahoo username and passwords were compromised years ago, and they're still used today, where somebody would get an email and say, hey, this is your password. I know you've used it. I know what you've been doing on your computer. And if you send us $700 or $500, we'll keep all that a secret. And it's all a scam, because those passwords have been, those credentials have been on the dark web, for many years. And as new compromises happen, those credentials also go on the dark web. So there are some subscription services that we subscribe to that gives us new credentials that are identified, so that we can let our clients or people affected by that know, hey, this has been identified, you might want to change that. And then if you see this kind of bully tactics are attempts to extort money from you based off of these credentials, you know that it's not real. Next slide. Next slide. So, we all know that this is a problem and an issue, and there's a lot of challenges that we have within our environments. And, I mentioned that out of the top 5 targeted industries, banks and financial institutions have done the best, is because there's some regulation that's saying, hey, you got to comply with this. And so they have these checklists of, next gen endpoint, next gen firewall, multi-factor authentication that you need to purchase. And that's how the majority of financial institutions have become some of the most secure organizations that are out there. And the other thing, as you buy and purchase all this stuff, it takes a big budget, and then that creates budget creep, because many tools have either annual subscriptions or annual maintenance and renewal. So it becomes expensive. The other thing is dedicated security expertise. There has been an expertise drought. There are many open positions, not only in the St. Louis region, but all across the United States, where there are somewhere around 800,000 positions for cybersecurity expertise that are unfilled, because they just aren't out there right now. Layer 8, that's the human element of either being the first line of defense or the weakest link. And there's always going to be those challenges with individuals. So it's kind of important to provide that training for layer 8, but also know who is at most risk in your environment, so that you can provide continuous enforcement and reinforcement to those individuals. And then the other thing, quite simply, is lack of visibility. We talked about how bad actors could be in the environment for 6 months or longer before being seen. And that's because there is a lack of visibility that we don't have. And if you don't know what normal is on your network or in your environment, then you don't know abnormal action when that abnormal action happens. And that typically is where the bad actor has gotten valid credentials from a user on a network, and then they start to move around the network in a way that that user has never done before. Or the user, once you have credentials, a user's credentials, they will use those to go through to find out who might have admin credentials, and they can sniff the wire, kind of monitor traffic on the network looking for username and passwords until they either have the ability to create their own administrative rights or take over somebody else's administrative rights. So that visibility, that lack of visibility, is important, that you gain some sort of visibility into the network, into the traffic flows. Next slide. So with all that said, we know it's a problem. What can you do? It's important to kind of know what your risk tolerance is. And you learn that risk tolerance by doing some sort of a cyber assessment or risk assessment on the environment, and then try to understand and realize what the financial impact of your organization would be of a potential breach. So the risk assessment, network assessment, or cybersecurity assessment, and then some form of exercise that says, hey, if we were to have a data breach, or if somebody locked up our environment, what would that cost us? And understanding those two things will really help you in preparing what you can do on your environment to bring you to some level of acceptable risk. There's always a current state of your security posture in your network, and a desired state of where you want to be. And understanding what that gap is will help know what the best investments for you are to protect your environment. The other thing is, a lot of organizations spend a lot of money on perimeter security, on the firewall, the intrusion identification. But what they don't spend a lot is on that network visibility piece, or identifying things that happen in the environment. And that's where early detection comes into place. We got to take that window of six months or more to identify a bad actor down to seconds. And the quicker that we can find them and detect them, the better we are to shut them down before they can really exfiltrate data or cause major financial stress on the organization. Also, a system of checks and balances. So this could be if you have an internal or external IT service provider. Large organizations, they'll have an IT team and they'll have a security team. The same is available to smaller organizations, just you might have a network service provider or an MSP, but it's important to have a cyber insurance specialist or a cyber insurance company that's continuously assessing the environment or monitoring the environment for the things that they specialize in, which is monitoring that bad actor, monitoring the threat, assessing the threat, and then providing feedback and resources to block those types of attacks. Next slide. So regularly assessing the environment tells you on a near more than once daily basis, there are new vulnerabilities discovered. And those vulnerabilities could be in a hardware issue, it could be a software issue, it could be configurations on different devices. So knowing that this is a multi-trillion-dollar business for the bad actors are very well organized, and they are constantly investing in education tools and technology to figure out how do we get into an environment. So regular ongoing assessments, it becomes very, very important to monitor and assess the attack surface of an organization, because as these new vulnerabilities pop up, we want to patch and complete and safeguard those as soon as possible. Especially when you look at the world of Microsoft, where they call it Patch Tuesdays. Microsoft once a month will announce all the new vulnerabilities in their code. Once that hits, all the bad actors in the world, if they didn't already know about those vulnerabilities, they do now, and they're going to start looking for those vulnerabilities out on the internet and looking for organizations that have those. Additionally, if you're purchasing products or relationships with your partners, utilize their areas of expertise and utilize them to help fill any gaps in expertise that you may have in your environment. That could mean a lot of different things. Companies that you do business with, it's kind of important to communicate with them what they're seeing out there in the world of cyber and learning from them, but also taking a few extra steps to say, hey, if you own an endpoint protection solution, no matter what that would be, you're paying money to them. It doesn't hurt to reach out to them and say, hey, will you look at our configuration to see if we have this set up properly, and maximize those types of relationships. Additionally, use trusted advisors. Trusted advisors from the cyber industry, kind of talk to them, find out what's going on, or hire a fractional virtual CISO, somebody that can help you guide the level of security for your organization. And join groups and associations to stay involved and stay informed. A lot of that can be the Chamber of Commerce, and if they don't have something cyber related on their agenda, talk to them and make sure that they do get something that's cyber related, so that there's a way for you to stay informed on what's going on, not only globally or nationally, but regionally as well. There's a lot of stuff that we've seen that's happened in the St. Louis region or central southern Illinois that we haven't seen in other areas of the country. So it's kind of important to stay connected. And then most importantly, also ongoing awareness for layer 8 and an open line of communication between your employees and your management team, because typically whenever somebody in upper management requests information, the normal employee wants to be able to get that information and provide it to them. If it's something that's abnormal or out of the ordinary, it's good for the majority of employees or the rank and file to question, hey, you made this request, do you really want me to do this? And that way you have a form of verbal validation or physical validation that this request is a legitimate request. So that ongoing training and reinforcement to layer 8 and to the human element of cyber, so that not only that person becomes a victim, but our organizations won't, is very, very important. Next slide. That's kind of a big overview of what we're seeing out there today. Additionally, how the dark web works, and kind of from a 10,000-foot view, information about that, along with some ideas that you can do to help protect your environment and increase the level of security or the security posture of your organization. Any questions or anything?
Thank you, David. That was very, very informative. Like you said, if you guys have any questions at all, please feel free to write those questions down in the questions tab. I will give everybody a few minutes here to, gather your thoughts. If you have any questions, we'll stay on here for a little bit and answer those as they come in. If you think of anything later, please feel free to email me, and we can get those questions over to David and he can answer those for you right away.
And Jennifer, thank you very much for setting this up. Really appreciate it. We love to talk about security.
No problem.
The dark web is really interesting to see how it works, and it's becoming easier and easier for people to exploit. So it's kind of good to have some good monitoring and good communication. I mean, it's something that we should all be talking about on a regular basis.
Absolutely. It's scary to think there's so many different ways that people can get to you.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions coming through at the moment. We might give it one more minute here and then we'll sign off for this webinar. Okay, I would say that concludes the webinar today. Thank you again, David and John, and we will be in touch.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.